Hi and welcome. My name is Cheryl and this video is part of my Falling into Winter Shawl tutorial series. In the description box below you'll find links to the free pattern and the playlist of all the videos in this series. There should also be a link to the playlist in the top right corner of this video. The Falling into Winter pattern has 7 sections and 1 separator section. Each section will have its own video tutorial where, after the introduction, I'll explain and demonstrate parts of the stitch pattern and finish with a troubleshooting section. That's where I'll show you how to fix some common mistakes. There will be timestamps in the description box so you can jump between sections. I encourage you to make a small swatch before you start working any new stitch pattern on your shawl. So grab some scrap yarn, a spare set of needles, and practice this stitch until you're comfortable with how it works. That way, when you do it for real on your shawl, you'll be confident that you can do it well. Okay, let's get started. This video is for section 2, the Garter Slip Stitch. You'll learn how to slip one purlwise and the meaning of the terms with yarn in back, yarn forward and yarn back. If you're already familiar with all of that, you may want to skip ahead to the troubleshooting section. So this is my practice swatch. I cast on 15 stitches and worked 4 rows of garter stitch, followed by the separator section. I've got 9 stitches in the middle, and they're my wedge stitches, and I've got 3 border stitches on either side. I've also worked rows 1 and 2 of this section since the wedges in that row are just knit stitches. I'll be working the instructions found between the first red brackets. So for row 3, we knit 3, they're our border stitches, slip the marker, do a garter left increase, and then we come to our brackets. So we knit 1, then with yarn in back, we slip 1 purlwise, knit the next stitch, and then we repeat from the asterisk these 2 instructions until we get to the next marker. So I knit my border stitches, slip the marker, do my garter left increase, and now the first instruction is to knit 1. Then with the yarn in back, which it is, it will always be at the back after you do a knit stitch. So we slip 1 purlwise. So we come from the right to the left through the front of the stitch and just slip it off the needle. And that's a slip 1 purlwise. We knit the next stitch. Slip the next stitch purlwise again, and then knit the next stitch. And I'm at the next marker, so I do, because I'm only working 1 wedge, I won't do the middle increase section. I'll just go straight to the end and do a right garter lift. You'll hear me mention the right side of the work and the wrong side of the work. The right side is often the pretty side, or the public side, and the wrong side is, it can be pretty, but it's the non-public side. So that's row 3 complete. We'll turn our work and do row 4. So row 4 this time, we knit the 3 edge stitches, slip the marker, then we're at our wedge section. We knit the first 2 stitches, and then with the yarn in front, we slip 1 purlwise, yarn back, and knit one. And we repeat from the asterisk until we're one stitch before the marker, and we'll knit that stitch. So let's see what that looks like. I might move the pattern out of the way. My needles keep hitting it. That's just annoying. So we knit the first 3 stitches. They're our border stitches. Slip the marker, and the instructions say to knit the first 2 stitches. And then we slip the next stitch. Before I do that, I'll show you that the stitch that we slip in row 4 is the same stitch that we slipped in row 3. And we can tell because we've got this strand in front of it. So I know that I need to slip this stitch, but the instructions say with yarn in front. So at the moment the yarn's in the back, I bring it forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. Again, we bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. And we repeat this until there's 1 stitch left before this stitch marker. And we have 1 stitch left before the stitch marker, and the instructions say to knit that stitch. Slip the marker, knit the next border stitches. In rows 5 and 6, we knit all of the wedge stitches, so I'll do that off camera and then I'll show you what the pattern looks like so far. I've completed rows 5 and 6 and we can see the pattern starting to emerge. We have these long loops. They were our slip stitches from rows 3 and 4. And then on the back we have these loops, and there'll be 2. For each slip stitch there'll be 2 strands. So one's more prominent than the other, but there are 2 strands on the back. And that's where we did our yarn in front when we were working row 3, or row 4, that's our yarn forward, yarn back. Okay, so I won't work rows 7 and 8 because they're basically the same as row 3 and 4 that I demonstrated here. If you need to, you can rewind the video, take it back and watch those instructions again. So I've just shown you how to correctly do rows 3 and 4. The same stitches are used in rows 7 and 8, so you should be able to do those correctly as well. But what happens if we get distracted, forget where we are in the pattern and make a mistake? On row 3 or row 7, what happens if you slip the stitch purlwise with the yarn in front instead of with the yarn in back? I've got another swatch here. I don't need the border stitches to show the mistakes. So with this one, I will knit the first stitch, and slip correctly with the yarn in back and knit the next stitch. And this time, instead of leaving the yarn in back, I'll bring it forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. I'll do it correctly and knit the next stitch. I'll bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch and take it back. So that was incorrectly. Correctly is with the yarn in back. Knit the next stitch. Incorrectly, I've brought the yarn forward, slipped it purlwise, taken the yarn back and knit the next stitch. And the last one I'll do correctly. So what does this look like on the wrong side when we've made some mistakes? Usually we don't know we've made mistakes and we're not going to go looking for them. But in case you do, the first slip stitch we did has a purl bump right underneath it on the needle. And the incorrectly slipped one also looks like it has a bump right underneath the needle. But if we pull it down, you can see that it's got two bumps. Some of them might look like they have two bumps, but again, you're not going to notice that. If your stitches are together and you don't know that you've made a mistake, you're not going to look for something as small as that. So we'll turn this row around, and can we see if we've made the mistake on the back? So the ones that are correctly slipped on the front will have this strand in front of them, and the ones that were incorrectly slipped are just a long loop with nothing in front of them. So this one was correct because it's got the strand in front of it, and this one's incorrect because it's just a long loop with nothing in front. I'll work row 4 and you'll see what happens when we get to an incorrectly slipped stitch. So I knit one. Remember that the stitches that were slipped on the previous row will be the ones that are slipped on this row. I know that this one is correctly slipped because it's got the strand in front of it, sort of like a diagonal strand. So I bring my yarn forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. Now the next stitch, you can see there's no diagonal strand in front of it. But if we look, we've got the strand on the back of the work. So to fix this, I slip the stitch to the right hand needle. I pick up that strand with my left hand needle and then take it up and over the stitch that I slipped. And the strand seems to want to do that. It's an easy thing to get over there, but sometimes it gets stuck and you can just wiggle it over there. So now I slip the stitch back to the left hand needle and then just drop the strand, and we can work it. It's a bit elongated, there's a lot more slack than normal. That's okay, it will get taken up. So we bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch purlwise, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. This one's correct because it's got the diagonal strand in front of it. So I bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch purlwise, yarn back and knit the stitch. And this should be a slip stitch, but there's no strand in front of it. And I can see the strand on the back. I slip it purlwise to my right hand needle, lift the strand that should be on this side, lift it up and over, slip the strand back, slip the stitch back and drop the strand And now I can work this stitch by bringing the yarn forward, slipping it and taking the yarn back. This stitch is correct. It's got the diagonal strand in front of it. Yarn forward, slip, yarn back, knit. Incorrect, no strand on this side and the strand is on the back side. I slip the stitch to the right hand needle. With the left needle, I pick up that strand, take it over, slip the stitch back and drop the strand. And now I can work the slip stitch by bringing the yarn forward, slipping it, taking the yarn back, and knit the next stitch. And this one's correct. So I just bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch, yarn back, and knit the last stitch. So what does this look like now? On the front we have our long slipped stitches as we're supposed to, and on the back each slip stitch has 2 strands. This is our with yarn in back on a row 3, and this is our yarn forward, yarn back on this row. And you'll notice that the ones that are incorrect, this first or bottom strand is elongated, and that's okay. It's going to get taken up in the fabric. It's not going to be a problem. Just a little bit loose. After you've washed your shawl a couple of times, it should even out a bit more too. And that's how you fix a stitch that was slipped with the yarn in front instead of in the back on a row 3 or a row 7. I've worked some rows of garter stitch, and I've also worked a row 3 because this time I'm going to show you how to correct a mistake on row 4 or row 8 when you've slipped the stitch with the yarn in back instead of bringing it forward. So this is row 3 complete. We'll turn the work and make some mistakes on row 4. So I'll knit the first stitch. Then I'll do this one correctly. I'll bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. And this time I'll forget to bring the yarn forward so the yarn's in back. Slip the stitch, knit the next stitch. I'll do it correctly. Yarn forward, slip purlwise, yarn back, knit the next. Incorrectly, leave the yarn at the back, slip purlwise, knit the next stitch. So for this stitch it can be hard to see on the side we just worked which stitches were slipped incorrectly. On the front it's a little more obvious. So the stitches that were slipped correctly are longer, and the ones that were slipped incorrectly just look like our knit stitches, kind of. So the long ones are the ones we want, and the short ones have a strand in front. And on the right side of the work, there shouldn't be any strands. So we'll show you how to correct that. It's corrected on the following row, which will be a row 5 or a row 1. And they're just knit all stitches in the wedges. So I'll knit a stitch. And now this stitch, I can see that I've got the diagonal strand in front of it and I don't want it to be there. So how do I fix this? I slip the stitch to my right hand needle, and coming from the front I lift the strand onto my left needle, and then I slip the stitch back to the left needle, take it with the right and just drop it off over on the back side, and then I can knit the stitch and keep going. And now I've come to another stitch where the strand is at the front. We're not supposed to have any strands on the front. So to correct this, again, slip the stitch to the right hand needle, come under the strand with your left needle, move the stitch back to the left needle, take the strand with your right and take it to the back and drop it off. And now we can knit the stitch. And we have another stitch with the strand in front. Slip the stitch to the right needle, pick up the strand with our left, slip the stitch back, take it over, the strand over, and drop it off where it's supposed to be, on the back. Knit the next stitch. So now on the front, after we've corrected the mistakes, we've got our long stitches, our slip stitches, and on the back, each slip stitch has the 2 strands. The ones that were slipped incorrectly, one of the strands will be larger. But that's okay. And that's how you fix a stitch that was slipped with the yarn in back instead of yarn forward on a row 4 or a row 8. So I've shown you how to correct mistakes when you've slipped a stitch with the yarn in the wrong place. So whether it was at the back and it should be at the front, or whether it was at the front and it should have been at the back. Now I want to show you what to do if you purl a stitch that should have been slipped. So I'll work it on row 3 first, and again row 3 is just like row 7. So we knit the first stitch, then slip purlwise with the yarn in back. Knit the next stitch. But what happens if I bring the yarn forward, purl the stitch, take the yarn back? And that's a mistake I'll make a couple of times on this row. So correctly, just with the yarn in back, slip it purlwise, knit the next stitch. This time I'm going to bring the yarn forward, purl the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. slip the stitch properly, knit the next stitch, yarn forward, purl the stitch, yarn back, knit, slip with yarn in back and knit the last stitch. So if we look at our stitches that were done correctly, we can see we've got quite a large rounded purl bump here. And when we did it incorrectly, when we actually purled the stitch, there is a bump there, but it's flatter. So this one was done correctly and it's big. This one was incorrect and it's flatter. Again, it's hard to tell. Stitches are smooshed together and you're not looking for a mistake. You won't know that you have made one. On the wrong side of our work, the stitches that were slipped correctly have a strand in front of them and they seem to be in pairs. So the two there are close together, two there are close together. The stitches that were purled instead of slipped actually have a knit stitch underneath them. So you can see the V there of the knit stitch. Here's another one that was purled instead of slipped. And there's another one. So this happened on a row 3 or a row 7. We can correct that mistake on the next row, which is a row 4 or a row 8. So I knit the first stitch. So I know this stitch has been slipped correctly because it has the strand in front of it. So for a row 4, I bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch purlwise and take the yarn back. Now this one has no strand on the front or the back, so that means I've knit the stitch. So what I want to do is undo this stitch, and that will give me the slipped stitch that I need plus the strand. You'll see once we work it. So to do this one, I take my right needle and I pick up the right leg of this on the stitch below the one on the needle, keep it on my right needle, drop it off the left needle, and then undo it by pulling the strand. You can use it with your needles or just your fingers. So now I have a strand at the back and I have a slipped stitch on my right hand needle. And similar to one of the other corrections, we pick up the strand with our left needle, take it up and over that slip stitch, move the slip stitch back to the left needle and drop the strand. Now this time the strand will be more elongated. It'll be looser than previous ones. Some of the slack will get taken up by other stitches. But now we can bring our yarn forward, slip this stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. This stitch was slipped correctly because there's the diagonal strand in front of it. So I bring my yarn forward, slip the stitch, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. This one has a knit stitch under it, so no strand on this side and no strand on the other side. So I take my right hand needle, lift the right leg, drop the stitch off the left hand needle and undo the stitch just by pulling the strand. There we go. So I have a slip stitch, I have the strand I want. It needs to be on this side of the work, so I lift it up, bring it over the stitch, slip the stitch back to the left hand needle and drop the stitch and drop the strand. Bring my yarn to the front, slip the stitch and take the yarn back, knit the next stitch. This one's correct. So I bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch purlwise, take the yarn back and knit the next stitch. An incorrect stitch, it looks like a knit stitch and there's no strand and no strand on the other side. So I lift the right leg with my right needle, drop the stitch off that left needle and undo it. Pick up that strand, bring it over the slip stitch, move it back to the left needle and just drop the strand. And now I can work it by bringing my yarn forward, slipping, taking the yarn back and knitting the next stitch. Yarn forward, slip, yarn back and knit the final stitch. On this side we've got the yarn strands that are loose because we knitted the stitch on the previous row, but there are still two strands. There's this long one here and the one up here, and these will lose some of their slack as we progress through. So this one and this one, and here's one that we did correctly and it's two strands. And that's how you fix a stitch that was purled instead of slipped in row 3 or row 7. I've shown you how to correct a stitch that was purled instead of slipped on a row 3 or a row 7. This time I'm going to show you how to fix a stitch that was purled instead of slipped on a row 4 or a row 8. So I've already knitted row 3, turn the work, and we'll work on making some mistakes in row 4. This is actually a mistake I make a lot. So we knit the first stitch and with yarn in front, slip purlwise and take the yarn back. Knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, and instead of slipping I'm going to purl and take the yarn back. Knit the next stitch. Bring the yarn forward, slip the stitch purlwise as we're supposed to, yarn back and knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, incorrectly purl the stitch, yarn back and knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, slip, yarn back and knit. Yarn forward, purl. More times than I can count I do this. Knit the next stitch. Yarn forward, slip and knit the last stitch. So what does it look like when we've made those mistakes? We can see that the correctly slipped stitch has a strand in front of it. The knit stitches have a bump. The incorrectly purled stitches also have a bump. And there shouldn't be, on our slip stitches, there shouldn't be any bumps, they're just the strands. But looking at it, you could mistake that for a strand. On the right side of our work, we have the correctly slipped stitches as long stitches and a knit stitch on the incorrectly worked stitches. This is probably the easiest mistake to correct. I know, I've had lots of practice at it. So, this is a row 5 or a row 1, which is just a knit stitch. So we knit the first stitch, the next, and this time we've come to a stitch that's got the V. It's a knit stitch, shouldn't be there, it should be a slip stitch. So we again lift the right leg with our right needle, slip it off, pull it out and slip the stitch back. Slip the stitch back and now we can knit it. So we didn't have to manoeuvre the strand anyway, it's just at the back. And then we can knit the next stitch. And that's one of the downfalls of this mistake, is that you can really elongate that next stitch. So I recommend, once you take the slack out again, I recommend knitting very gently on the tips of your needle after that correction, just so that the stitch doesn't get blown out. And then we knit the next stitch. Knit the next stitch. And now we've come again to a stitch that should be a slip stitch but is actually has a knit stitch underneath it. Lift the right leg with your right needle, drop the stitch off, pull the strand out, slip the stitch back and knit it. And again, knit the next stitch on the tips of your needles or close to it so that it doesn't pull up all of the slack from that strand we made. Knit the next stitch. And this one is a knit stitch where it should have been a slip. So we lift with the right needle, pull out the strand, slip the stitch back and knit it. And so following this one, we knit on the tips of our needle and finish out the row. And that's how you fix a stitch that was purled instead of slipped on a row 4 or a row 8. If we turn it over, you can see that when we corrected it, it's left a sloppier yarn strand. But again, that will get picked up in the fabric once we work some more of the fabric. So that's how to correct 4 common mistakes. As I said, the last one, I do it all the time. I think because I'm used to, on the wrong side of the work, doing purl stitches. I'm sure there are more mistakes that I haven't discovered yet, or if I have, I haven't noticed them. And in the grand scheme of things, if you don't correct a mistake, it's probably not going to be noticeable anyway, especially in the Garter Slip Stitch pattern. There are some patterns where a mistake will stick out like a sore thumb. This isn't one of them. Well, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. I'll see you in the next video, which will be for section 3, the ridged eyelet stitch. Bye for now.